Move out. I want your room for a walk-in closet. I've already talked to Mom and Dad about it, and they agree. You can find somewhere else to live. You're 24. It's time anyway." My sister Natalie's words cut through the morning quiet of our family kitchen like a knife, delivered with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never been denied anything in her entire life. I sat at the breakfast table holding my cup of tea, watching steam rise from the surface, and for a moment I wondered if I'd heard her correctly. But the expectant look on her face, not apologetic, not even slightly uncomfortable, just entitled and certain, told me I'd heard exactly right. My parents sat at the table with us, my father reading his newspaper and my mother scrolling through her phone, and neither of them said a word in my defense. Their silence was agreement, just like Natalie had said. They'd already discussed this among themselves, decided my fate, and were now simply waiting for me to accept the verdict. My name is Jordan Blake, and I'm going to tell you the story of how I went from being the invisible child in my family to the one they couldn't afford to lose, and how I walked away from them anyway. But stay with me here, because what happened after I left that house in the black car changed everything, and you need to understand exactly how I got to that moment to appreciate why what came next mattered so much. I should probably start by explaining the family dynamic that led to my 24-year-old sister demanding my bedroom be converted into a closet for her. Excessive wardrobe while I was actively living there. Was the younger child by 6 years. The one who came along after my parents had already figured out parenting with Natalie and had decided she was perfect, and no subsequent child could possibly measure up. Natalie was everything they'd wanted. Beautiful, social, popular, obsessed with status and appearances, and all the shallow markers of success that my parents valued above actual character or accomplishment. From the time I was old enough to have thoughts of my own, I was different from them in fundamental ways. I was quiet where Natalie was loud, thoughtful where she was reactive, interested in books and ideas where she was interested in parties and shopping and social media followers. My parents found me confusing and slightly disappointing. Not bad enough to actively dislike, but not impressive enough to actually be proud of or interested in. Natalie had gone to a state university, majored in something vague like communications, graduated with mediocre grades, and immediately moved back home where she'd been living for the past 3 years while working at a boutique clothing store and spending most of her income on her appearance. She had thousands of followers on Instagram, where she posted carefully curated photos of her outfits and her brunch locations and her manufactured lifestyle that looked much more impressive than the reality of living in our parents' house at 27. With a retail job, I, on the other hand, had gone to community college on a scholarship, worked part-time throughout my education to avoid debt, and recently earned my degree in computer science with a 4.0 GPA while living at home to save money. I'd been applying to jobs in my field, going to interviews, building my skills and my portfolio. I was methodical and patient and working toward actual goals rather than just posting pretty pictures online. But to my parents, Natalie's life was more impressive because it looked impressive. She had designer clothes and went to trendy restaurants and had thousands of people validating her online, even if she had no savings, no independence, and no real plan for her future beyond hoping to marry someone wealthy. Meanwhile, I had an actual education and actual skills and was building toward actual financial independence. But that wasn't showy or Instagram-worthy, so it didn't register as success in their eyes. The favoritism had been present my entire life, but it had gotten exponentially worse over the past few years as Natalie's social media following grew, and she started getting occasional sponsorship deals from small brands. Suddenly she was an influencer, and my parents treated her like she'd won a Nobel Prize, constantly talking about her posts and her engagement rates and how impressive it was that she had 15,000 followers. When I graduated with honors and got my computer science degree, my mother said, "That's nice, dear," and went back to helping Natalie pick filters for her Instagram photos. When I mentioned I had a second-round interview for a software engineering position, my father asked if I'd seen Natalie's latest post that got over 500 likes. The message was clear. Nothing I achieved would ever matter as much as Natalie's manufactured online persona. So when Natalie announced at breakfast that she wanted my bedroom converted into a walk-in closet for her constantly expanding wardrobe, I shouldn't have been surprised that my parents immediately agreed. After all, her needs had always come first, and my presence in the house had always been tolerated rather than valued. Did you hear me? Natalie asked, snapping her fingers in front of my face when I didn't immediately respond to her announcement. I need you out by the end of the week. I've already talked to a contractor about building custom shelving and a shoe rack system. This is happening. I took a slow sip of my tea, buying myself time to process what was happening and decide how to respond. Part of me wanted to explode with rage at the unfairness of it all, at the casual dismissal of my right to a home, at my parents' complicit silence. Part of me wanted to beg them to reconsider, to see how cruel and unreasonable this was. Part of me wanted to make them feel guilty for choosing Natalie's clothes over their younger child's need for shelter. But I did none of those things. Instead, I set down my teacup with careful precision and said simply, "Okay." Natalie's eyebrows raised in surprise. "Okay, that's it? No dramatic scene, no crying, no trying to change anyone's mind? What would be the point?" I asked calmly, meeting her eyes directly for the first time that morning. "You've already decided, Mom and Dad have already agreed, and nothing I say will change any of your minds. So yes, okay, I'll be out by the end of the week." My mother finally looked up from her phone, a slight frown on her face. "Jordan, we're not trying to be cruel, but Natalie's career requires a certain image, and her current closet space is simply inadequate for maintaining her wardrobe properly. Your room has the best light and the most space. It makes practical sense." "Her career," I repeated slowly, tasting the words. "Her retail job and her Instagram account require so much closet space that I need to become homeless." "That makes practical sense to you?" "You're not going to be homeless," my father said dismissively, finally lowering his newspaper to look at me. "You're 24 years old with a college degree. It's time you got your own place anyway. We've been generous letting you stay here this long." The irony was stunning. Natalie was 27, and they'd never once suggested she get her own place. But I was 24, and suddenly needed to leave so she could have a bigger closet. The double standard would have been funny if it wasn't so painful. "You're right," I said, standing up from the table and rinsing my teacup in the sink with movements that were precise and controlled. "I'll start looking for places today and begin packing my things." "See, this is why Jordan is my favorite sister," Natalie said with a laugh that was supposed to sound affectionate, but came across as condescending. "So practical and easygoing. I knew you'd understand. And honestly, this is probably good for you. You spend way too much time in that room anyway, hiding away with your computer stuff. Getting out in the world more will be good for you." I didn't bother pointing out that I was her only sister, or that I spent time in my room studying and working on developing skills that would actually support me financially long-term, or that she had no idea what was good for me, because she'd never bothered to actually know me as a person. What would be the point? These weren't people who valued understanding or growth or genuine connection. These were people who valued appearances and social media metrics, and which child made them feel more impressive to their friends. I walked upstairs to my room, soon to be Natalie's walk-in closet, and closed the door behind me. The room was modest, but it had been mine since I was 9 years old. It held my books, my computer setup where I'd taught myself advanced programming, my clothes and personal belongings, and memories from 15 years of living there. And in less than a week, it would be gutted and converted into a storage space for designer handbags and shoes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I sat on my bed and pulled out my phone, opening messages and staring at a conversation thread I'd been both hoping for and dreading for the past few weeks. The messages were from my best friend from college, Alexis Chen, who also happened to be the daughter of tech, billionaire Richard Chen and the heir to a massive tech company, Empire. Alexis and I had bonded during our first computer science class when we'd been paired for a project and discovered we had remarkably similar approaches to problem solving, despite coming from completely different worlds. She was brilliant, down to earth despite her wealth, and had become the closest friend I'd ever had. She knew about my family situation, the favoritism, the dismissal, the way I was treated as an afterthought in my own home. And 3 weeks ago, she'd made me an offer that I'd been too proud and too uncertain to accept, until now. The message thread read, "Alexis, Jordan, serious question. Would you consider coming to work for my father's company? We need a junior developer on our AI team, and you're literally perfect for it. Better than perfect. You're brilliant, and I've seen your code. The starting salary is $175K plus full benefits and equity. Please say yes." Me. That's incredibly generous, but I can't accept a job just because we're friends. I need to earn opportunities, not have them handed to me. Alexis. This isn't being handed to you, you absolute martyr. I showed my father your portfolio and your senior project, and he specifically asked me to recruit you. He doesn't give jobs to my friends unless they're genuinely qualified. This is a real offer based on real merit. Stop being stubborn and think about what's actually best for your career. Me. I need to think about it. Alexis. You've been thinking about it for 3 weeks. The offer expires next Friday. After that, we'll have to hire someone else, and you'll have missed an incredible opportunity because you were too proud to accept help from someone who actually values you. That conversation had been sitting in my messages for 2 weeks, with me too uncertain and too proud to respond. I'd been afraid it was charity, afraid that accepting would somehow mean I couldn't make it on my own, afraid of all sorts of things that now seem stupid and irrelevant. Because here's what nobody in my family knew. And if you're still watching, this is where things get interesting, because everything they believed about me was about to be spectacularly proven wrong. I'd been interviewing with 3 other tech companies over the past month. I'd gotten offers from 2 of them, one for $95,000 and one for $110,000, both excellent starting salaries for a new graduate in my field. I'd been planning to accept one of them, move out in a few months when I'd saved enough for a deposit and first month's rent, and begin my independent life on my own terms and my own timeline. But Alexis's offer was different. It wasn't just a job. It was a door into a world my family couldn't even imagine, an opportunity to work on cutting-edge artificial intelligence projects with some of the best minds in the field. And yes, a salary that was extraordinary for someone just starting their career. I'd been hesitating because I wanted to succeed on my own merit, but the reality was that this was based on merit. Richard Chen didn't hire people out of kindness to his daughter's friends. He hired people who could contribute to his company's mission and success. I looked around my room one more time, thinking about how my family saw me. The quiet one, the boring one, the one whose achievements didn't matter because they weren't photogenic or impressive to their social circle. They thought I was going to scramble to find some cheap apartment and some entry-level job and struggle my way to mediocrity while Natalie posted photos of her designer shoe collection. In her new walk-in closet, they had absolutely no idea what was about to happen. Opened my messages and typed a response to Alexis. Me, I'm in. When do I start? Her response came back within seconds. Alexis, yes! Thank God you finally came to your senses. Officially, you start in 2 weeks. But Dad wants to fly you out to the Bay Area this weekend to get you set up. He's arranging corporate housing until you find a permanent place. Pack for a week. Everything else can be shipped later. I'll send the travel details within an hour. Jordan, I'm so excited. You're going to crush it. Welcome to Chen Technologies. My phone buzzed again almost immediately with details about a flight that weekend and temporary housing arrangements and information about the onboarding process. And then another message. Alexis. Dad is sending a car to pick you up Friday evening for your flight Saturday morning. Driver will be there at 7 p.m. That work for you? Me, perfect. Thank you for believing in me when my own family doesn't, Alexis. They're idiots. Their loss. See you soon, soon-to-be coworker. I looked at the calendar. Friday was in 3 days. My family had given me until the end of the week to move out so Natalie could have her precious closet. I'd be gone by Friday evening, headed to a 6-figure job and a life they couldn't even comprehend. And they'd still think I was probably moving into some shabby apartment and struggling to find work. For the next 3 days, I was the perfect model of compliance and quiet cooperation. I didn't argue or complain or try to change anyone's mind. I methodically packed my belongings into boxes, sorted through what I'd take immediately versus what would be shipped later, and watched my family treat my displacement as a minor inconvenience that was necessary for Natalie's important influencer career. Natalie brought contractors to my room while I was still packing, discussing custom shelving and lighting systems and shoe racks. She never once asked me where I was going, or if I'd found a place, or if I needed any help with moving. Neither did my parents. It was like I was already gone, already irrelevant, a problem that had solved itself through my convenient cooperation. The only person who showed any awareness that maybe this situation was problematic was my grandmother, who called me Thursday afternoon. Jordan, your mother told me about Natalie's new closet project, she said. her voice heavy with disapproval that she knew better than to express directly to my parents. "Are you okay? Where are you going to live?" "I'm fine, Grandma. I have something lined up. Don't worry about me." "Your parents should be ashamed of themselves," she said bluntly. "The way they've treated you compared to your sister your whole life. It's not right. You deserve better than this family has given you." "I know," I said simply. "And I'm going to have better. Starting now." Friday evening arrived. All my immediate belongings were packed in 4 suitcases and 3 boxes. Everything else would be shipped by a moving company to my new address once I had a permanent apartment in the Bay Area. I'd changed my address with the post office, notified the few bills I had in my name, and systematically extracted myself from this house and this family's life. My parents were in the living room watching television. Natalie was upstairs in her current room getting ready for a dinner with friends. None of them knew that in about 15 minutes, a car was coming to take me to the beginning of a completely different life. At exactly 7 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message that a car had arrived. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. A sleek black Mercedes SUV with tinted windows sat at the curb, and a driver in a professional suit was approaching our front door. Professional courtesy, immediately taking my suitcases. "I'm Michael, and I'll be driving you to your hotel tonight. Mr. Chen wanted to make sure you were comfortable. We'll get your luggage loaded and be on our way." Behind me, I heard movement in the house. My mother appeared in the hallway looking confused. "Jordan, what's going on? Who is this?" "My ride," I said simply, handing Michael another suitcase. "I'm leaving now." "Leaving for where?" My father had appeared now too, both of them looking at the expensive car and the professional driver with growing confusion. "Where are you going? And what is this car?" Natalie had heard the commotion and came running down the stairs, taking in the scene with wide eyes. "Jordan, whose car is that? Did you call some kind of moving service or something?" "It's corporate transportation," I replied, keeping my voice neutral and calm. "For my flight tomorrow. I'm moving to California for a job." "A job?" My mother's face showed genuine shock now. "When did this happen?" "What job, in California?" "I accepted a position at Chen Technologies about an hour after Natalie demanded my room on Tuesday morning," I explained, watching their faces carefully. "I start as a junior AI developer in 2 weeks. The company is flying me out for orientation and to find permanent housing." The silence that followed was profound. My parents stared at me like I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. Natalie's mouth literally fell open. My father recovered first. "Chen Technologies? As in Richard Chen's company? The billionaire?" "That's the one," I confirmed. "My college friend Alexis is Richard Chen's daughter. She recommended me for the position after seeing my portfolio. I interviewed virtually 3 weeks ago and received the offer shortly after." "And you're just telling us this now?" My mother's shock was shifting to something that looked like anger. "You've been planning to move to California and you didn't think to mention it?" "You didn't ask," I said simply. "None of you asked where I was going or what my plans were or if I needed any help. You just needed me gone by the end of the week so Natalie could have a closet. So I'm gone. Problem solved." Michael had finished loading my luggage into the car and was waiting patiently by the passenger door. I started to walk toward the vehicle, but Natalie grabbed my arm. "Wait, you're leaving right now? Tonight? We should talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, gently removing her hand from my arm. "You wanted my room, you're getting my room. I needed a place to live. I found a place to live. Everyone gets what they want. What's the problem?" "The problem is you're moving across the country and we had no idea," my father said, his voice rising. "This is a major life decision. You're our daughter, we should have been consulted, been part of this conversation. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button because what I said next made them realize exactly what they'd lost. And it was already too late." I laughed, a sound without much humor in it. "Consulted? Dad, you literally told me 3 days ago that it was time for me to move out anyway. Well, I'm moving out. I'm just doing it more successfully than you apparently expected. And you're upset about it? Why? Because I didn't ask your permission? Because I didn't beg for your approval? I stopped expecting that years ago." "Jordan, this is ridiculous," Natalie said, her voice taking on that whiny quality she used when she wasn't getting her way. You can't just leave like this without even discussing it with your family. What about us? What if we need you? What would you need me for? I asked, genuinely curious. In the 24 years I've lived here, when have any of you ever needed me for anything? When have you ever treated me like I mattered beyond being the less impressive daughter you had to tolerate? That's not fair, my mother protested. We've always loved you. Maybe, I acknowledged. But love without respect or interest or investment is pretty hollow. You love me the way you'd love a houseplant. Something that exists in your house, requires occasional maintenance, but isn't particularly important or interesting. Natalie's entire wardrobe has gotten more attention and consideration from you than I have in the past 5 years. That's not true, my father tried to argue, but his voice lacked conviction. Dad, when I graduated with honors last month, Mom said, "That's nice," and went back to helping Natalie edit her Instagram photos. When I told you I had interviews for software engineering positions, you asked if I'd seen Natalie's latest post. 3 days ago, when Natalie demanded my room for a closet, neither of you said a word in my defense. You just agreed that her clothes were more important than my housing. So please don't pretend now that I'm important to this family, because we all know that's not true. Michael cleared his throat politely. Ms. Blake, I apologize for interrupting, but we should depart soon to ensure you're not late for your dinner reservation with Ms. Chen. Dinner reservation? Natalie's voice went up an octave. You're having dinner with Alexis Chen? The billionaire's daughter? She's my best friend from college, I replied. We studied together, worked on projects together, supported each other through finals and stress and all the normal college things. She happens to also be a billionaire's daughter, but that's not why she's my friend, though it is nice that she actually values me enough to create career opportunities for me, which is more than I can say for the family I was born into. I turned to Michael. I'm ready to go. Thank you for your patience. As I walked toward the car, my mother called out desperately, Jordan, wait. We need to talk about this properly. Come back inside. Let's have a family meeting. There's nothing to meet about, I said, pausing at the car door. You made your priorities clear and I've made mine. I'm going to California to start a job that pays $175,000 a year. I'm going to work on cutting-edge artificial intelligence projects with some of the best minds in the field. I'm going to build a life where I'm valued for my abilities and contributions, not compared unfavorably to my sister's Instagram following. And I'm going to do it all without you. $175,000? My father's voice was barely above a whisper. Your starting salary is $175,000? Plus benefits and equity, I added. Which means stock options in a company worth billions. So yes, I'll be fine financially. Better than fine, actually. You can have my room guilt-free. Natalie had gone pale, and I could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. She made maybe $30,000 at her retail job, and probably another 10 or 15 from her small sponsorship deals. I was going to make more in my first year than she'd made in her entire working life. The golden child, the favored daughter, the one whose needs always came first, suddenly found out she was the less successful sibling by an enormous margin. Jordan, please. My mother tried again. Don't leave like this. Stay and we'll figure this out. Maybe we were hasty about the room situation. Maybe. I repeated. Mom, I'm getting in this car now. I'm going to dinner with my friend. Tomorrow I'm flying to California. In 2 weeks I'm starting a job that represents everything I've worked toward for the past 4 years. This isn't a tantrum or a dramatic exit or an attempt to manipulate you into treating me better. This is just me leaving. Like you wanted. Like you told me to do. We didn't mean... My father started. Yes, you did. I interrupted gently but firmly. You meant exactly what you said. You just didn't expect me to have better options than scrambling to find a cheap apartment and struggling to make rent. You thought I'd be the failure you always expected me to be. Turns out I'm not. Turns out I'm actually quite successful. And you're going to have to live with knowing you. Prioritized a walk-in closet over a relationship with the daughter who actually built something worth having. I got into the car and Michael closed the door behind me. Through the tinted window, I could see my family standing in the driveway looking shell-shocked and confused. Natalie was crying. My parents were talking to each other rapidly, gesturing toward the car. But I couldn't hear them anymore, and honestly, I didn't want to. As Michael pulled away from the curb and drove down the street I'd grown up on, I felt an unexpected wave of emotion. Not sadness exactly, though there was grief for what should have been but never was. Not anger, though that was still there under the surface. Mostly what I felt was relief. Relief that I was finally free from the constant comparison and dismissal. Relief that I'd never have to watch Natalie get praise and attention for posting a photo while my actual achievements went unnoticed. Relief that I was driving away from people who'd proven they didn't value me, toward people who did. Michael caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "Ms. Blake, if you don't mind me saying, that took tremendous courage. I've worked for the Chen family for 8 years, and I've seen a lot of talented young people start with the company, but I've never seen someone handle a difficult family situation with that much composure and clarity. Mr. Chen was right to hire you." "Thank you," I said, surprised by the compliment, though I think I'm still processing what just happened. "You made the right choice," he said confidently. "People who don't see your value don't deserve your presence. Mr. Chen says that all the time. He built his company by hiring people others overlooked and giving them opportunities to prove themselves. You're going to do well there." 20 minutes later, we pulled up to an upscale restaurant in the city. Alexis was waiting outside, and when she saw the car, she practically ran over to greet me as I got out. "Jordan," she hugged me tightly. "Oh my God, you actually did it! You're here!" "How did it go?" "About as well as could be expected," I replied. They were shocked, confused, upset that I was leaving without their blessing or input. It was actually kind of satisfying, if I'm being honest. "Good," Alexis said firmly, linking her arm through mine as we walked into the restaurant. "They deserve to be shocked. The way you've described them treating you versus your sister, it's been infuriating to watch from the outside. I'm glad you're finally free from that dynamic." Over dinner at an incredible restaurant I definitely couldn't have afforded on my own, Alexis filled me in on what the next few weeks would look like. The corporate housing was a fully furnished apartment in Mountain View, close to the Chen Technologies campus. I'd have a month there to find a permanent place, and the company would cover moving expenses. I'd be joining a team of 8 other developers working on natural language processing algorithms for the company's AI assistant platform. "The work is challenging but incredible," Alexis explained enthusiastically. "And the team is amazing, super collaborative, really supportive of junior developers, no toxic bro culture nonsense. You're going to love it. Plus, the campus has everything. Free meals, gym, dry cleaning, even a clinic. It's honestly like a small city." "It sounds almost too good to be true," I admitted. "I keep waiting for the catch." "The catch is that the work is genuinely hard, and you'll probably put in long hours because you're passionate about the projects. Not because anyone forces you to," Alexis said. "But you're brilliant and you love this stuff, so that's not really a catch for you. Jordan, you deserve this. You've earned this. Stop waiting for someone to tell you that you're not good enough, because you are. You're more than good enough." I felt tears forming and blinked them back. "Thank you. For believing in me when my own family doesn't. For actually seeing what I'm capable of." "Always," Alexis promised. "We're going to be working together, living near each other, having adventures, building cool stuff. This is going to be the best chapter of your life. I guarantee it." She was right, though I didn't fully realize it yet. But as I sat in that restaurant eating incredible food and talking with my best friend about our future, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the overlooked child, the less impressive sibling, the boring one who didn't matter as much. I was Jordan Blake, software engineer, about to start work at one of the most innovative tech companies in the world, valued for my skills and my mind and my contributions. That night, lying in the luxury hotel room the company had arranged for me, I scrolled through my phone and saw 17 missed calls from my parents and 12 texts from Natalie. I didn't read them or respond. There would be time for that later, maybe, or maybe not. But tonight, I just wanted to enjoy the peace of knowing I'd made the right choice. Drop a comment telling me if you think I should have given my family another chance or if I did the right thing by walking away, because what happens over the next 10 years is going to blow your mind. The flight to California the next morning was surreal. I'd never flown first class before. The Chen Technologies travel policy included first class for all employees on flights over 3 hours. And sitting in that spacious seat with actual legroom and real food, I kept thinking about how just 24 hours ago I'd been in my childhood bedroom packing up my life, while my family planned to convert my space into a closet. When I landed in San Francisco, there was another driver waiting with a sign with my name on it. He took me to the corporate housing in Mountain View, a beautiful modern apartment in a complex clearly designed for young tech workers. The apartment was fully furnished with contemporary furniture, a full kitchen already stocked with basics, and floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the hills. It was nicer than anywhere I'd ever lived, and it was mine for the next month while I found permanent housing. I spent the weekend settling in, exploring the area, and trying to wrap my head around how dramatically my life had changed in less than a week. My phone continued to buzz with messages from my family, but I wasn't ready to engage yet. I needed space to process everything, to start this new chapter without being pulled back into old dynamics. Monday morning, I reported to the Chen Technologies campus for orientation. The campus was everything Alexis had described and more: sprawling buildings with innovative architecture, beautifully landscaped grounds, indoor and outdoor collaboration spaces, and amenities that rivaled a resort. I met my team, settled into my desk with its multiple monitors and top-of-the-line equipment, and dove into the work. The projects were challenging and fascinating, exactly the kind of cutting-edge AI development I'd dreamed about working on. My teammates were brilliant but welcoming, happy to mentor a junior developer who showed genuine passion and aptitude. My manager, a woman named Dr. Sarah Kim, who'd been with the company for 8 years, took me under her wing immediately. "Richard doesn't hire people unless he's convinced they have real potential," she told me during our first one-on-one meeting. "Alexis recommended you, but you're here because your work in the interview process and your portfolio demonstrated genuine talent. Don't let imposter syndrome creep in. You belong here." I threw myself into the work with an intensity that surprised even me. I stayed late most nights, not because anyone expected it, but because I was genuinely excited about the problems we were solving. I collaborated with teammates, learned new frameworks and approaches, contributed ideas that were actually heard and valued. For the first time in my life, I was in an environment where my intelligence and capabilities were assets, rather than irrelevant details overshadowed by someone else's Instagram metrics. 6 weeks into the job, I found a permanent apartment, a beautiful one-bedroom in Palo Alto, walking distance from amazing restaurants and shops, in a safe neighborhood with other young professionals. The rent was substantial but easily manageable on my salary. I furnished it slowly and thoughtfully, creating a space that actually reflected my tastes and interests, rather than hand-me-down furniture and the bare minimum. During this time, I'd continued to ignore most messages from my family. But around the 2-month mark, I finally responded to my grandmother when she texted asking if I was okay. Me. "I'm more than okay, Grandma. I'm thriving. I'm sorry I've been out of touch, but I needed space to start fresh without getting pulled back into family drama." "Grandma. I understand, sweetheart. I'm proud of you. Your parents are miserable for what it's worth. They realize they made a terrible mistake. Natalie's new closet isn't bringing her the joy she expected, somehow." Me. "I'm sorry they're miserable, but that's not my responsibility to fix. They made their choices. I've made mine. Grandma, fair enough. Just know that I love you and I'm here if you ever want to talk. No pressure, no judgment." 3 months into my job, my manager called me into her office with Richard Chen himself. I'd met him briefly during orientation but hadn't had much direct interaction since then. "Jordan," Richard began, his presence commanding but not intimidating. "Sarah has been giving me excellent reports on your work. Your contributions to the natural language processing project have exceeded expectations for a junior developer. More than that, you've shown initiative and creativity that suggests you won't be junior for long." "Thank you, Mr. Chen," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the nervousness. "I love the work we're doing. I feel incredibly lucky to be here." "Luck has nothing to do with it," he said firmly. "You're here because you're talented and you work hard. I wanted to talk to you about your career trajectory. Sarah thinks you're ready for more responsibility, and I agree. We'd like to move you to the Advanced AI Research Team. It's a significant step up, more complex projects, but also more visibility and faster advancement potential. Interested? Was I interested in joining the most prestigious team at one of the most innovative tech companies in the world, Working on projects that would shape the future of AI? Yes, I managed. Absolutely yes. Good. You'll start transitioning next week. There will also be a salary adjustment to reflect your new role and responsibilities. HR will send you the details, but you're looking at about $210,000 annually now. I must have looked shocked, because Richard laughed. Jordan, you're worth it. Don't ever let anyone, including that voice in your head that sounds suspiciously like self-doubt, tell you otherwise. You've earned this. That evening, I called Alexis, who shrieked with excitement when I told her about the promotion. See? I told you that you'd crush it. Jordan, you've been there 3 months and you're already getting promoted. That's insane. People usually don't move up this fast. Your father said I earned it, I replied, still processing. Because you did earn it. Stop waiting for someone to reveal that it's all a mistake, or that you don't actually deserve good things. You're brilliant. Accept it. 6 months after leaving home, I video called my grandmother for her birthday. During our conversation, she casually mentioned that my parents had been asking about me constantly. They want to talk to you, she said gently. They've realized what they lost. Natalie's been having a hard time too. Her engagement metrics are down and she lost a sponsorship deal. The contrast between where she is and where you are, it's been hard for them to process. I'm not responsible for making them feel better about their choices, I said carefully. And I'm not interested in reconnecting just because I'm successful now and they've decided I might be worth their attention after all. I understand, Grandma said. But they're your parents. At some point, you might want closure even if you don't want a relationship. She was right, though I wasn't ready yet. But the conversation planted a seed. Maybe eventually I would talk to them. Not to reconcile necessarily, but to say clearly and finally what I'd never been able to say while living under their roof and desperately wanting their approval. The first year at Chen Technologies passed in a blur of challenging work, personal growth, new friendships, and gradually building a life that was genuinely mine. I traveled for conferences, contributed to papers that were published in prestigious journals, became known in certain circles as an up-and-coming expert in natural language processing and machine learning. My salary increased again at my one-year review, this time to $245,000. I bought a car. Nothing flashy, but reliable and nice. I traveled for pleasure, taking trips to places I'd always wanted to see. I built a retirement portfolio and investment accounts. I lived well, but not extravagantly, saving substantial amounts of money while enjoying the fruits of my hard work. I was 25 years old and more financially secure than I'd ever imagined possible. And through all of it, I maintained almost no contact with my family beyond occasional texts with my grandmother. My parents' calls and messages had eventually slowed and then stopped. Natalie had tried a few times to reconnect, her messages increasingly desperate and transparent in their desire to associate with my success, but I never responded. Around the 18-month mark, something happened that finally forced me to engage with my family again, though not in the way they probably hoped. My grandmother had a stroke. Not a minor one like my mother had experienced years ago, but a serious one that required intensive care and long-term rehabilitation. The family called me immediately, and despite everything, I flew home within hours because I genuinely loved my grandmother, and she'd been the only family member who'd ever truly seen and valued me. When I walked into the hospital waiting room, my parents were there. I hadn't seen them in person in 18 months, and the change was visible. They looked older, more worn, and when they saw me, they both stood up immediately with expressions that were complicated. Hope, shame, desperation, and something that might have been genuine remorse. "Jordan," my mother said, tears immediately forming. "Thank you for coming. We've missed you so much." "I'm here for Grandma," I said evenly. "How is she?" My father provided an update on her condition. Stable but serious, long recovery ahead, lots of uncertainty. As he talked, I could see him taking in my appearance, the expensive but understated clothes, the confidence in my posture that hadn't been there before, the way I held myself like someone who knew their worth. When he finished, there was an awkward silence. Finally, my mother asked, "How are you? We've heard things from your grandmother, but we'd love to hear from you directly, about your life, your work, everything." "I'm well," I replied neutrally. My career is going exactly as I'd hoped. I'm fulfilled professionally, financially secure, and happy with the life I've built. We heard you got promoted, my father said carefully, multiple times. Your grandmother mentioned you're doing important work in artificial intelligence. That's correct. Another silence. More painful this time. They wanted more. Wanted me to open up and share and act like we had some kind of relationship that warranted that level of openness, but we didn't. They'd forfeited that when they chose a walk-in closet over their daughter. Make sure you're subscribed because what happened over the next few days at the hospital revealed some truths that changed everything, including whether I'd ever speak to my family again. Natalie arrived at the hospital a few hours after me, and the moment she saw me, her face did something complicated. Surprise, discomfort, and what looked almost like shame. She'd lost the polished, confident influencer veneer I remembered. She looked tired and uncertain, and I noticed she wasn't carrying any designer bags or wearing the expensive clothes she used to favor. Jordan, she said quietly, I didn't know you were coming. Grandma had a stroke, I replied simply. Of course I came. Over the next 3 days, as we all kept vigil waiting for Grandma to stabilize, the truth gradually came out through uncomfortable conversations and overheard family discussions. Natalie's influencer career had essentially collapsed. The Instagram algorithm had changed, her engagement had dropped dramatically, and brands weren't interested in working with someone whose audience wasn't growing. The walk-in closet she'd demanded, my former bedroom, sat half empty now because she'd had to sell most of her designer items to cover debt from credit cards. She'd maxed out trying to maintain an expensive lifestyle she couldn't actually afford. She'd lost her retail job when the store closed, and she was working as a virtual assistant making barely minimum wage. My parents' business had hit difficult times due to some poor investments and increased competition. They weren't in danger financially, but they weren't as comfortable as they used to be, and the stress had taken a toll on their health and their relationship. Essentially, the family unit that had seemed so stable and successful when I left, with Natalie as the golden child with her impressive online presence and my parents, as the satisfied parents who'd raised a daughter who looked successful, had all fallen apart. And I could see in their faces that they'd spent 18 months regretting their choices and realizing what they'd lost. On the third day, when Grandma had stabilized enough that the crisis phase had passed, my mother cornered me in the hospital cafeteria. Jordan, we need to talk. Really talk. Can we please have an honest conversation? I looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, let's talk. We found a quiet corner, and my mother took a deep breath before beginning. We were wrong. About everything. The way we treated you. The way we prioritized Natalie. The way we didn't see or value what you were building. We were wrong and we're sorry. Why? I asked bluntly. Why were you wrong? Because I turned out to be successful? Because I make more money than you expected? Because I'm not the failure you thought I'd be? Or are you sorry because you actually understand that you treated your daughter badly regardless of how successful I became? She flinched. That's fair. And you're right. At first, when we realized how well you were doing, we were just shocked. And maybe initially that's what made us realize we'd misjudged you. But over these 18 months, I've done a lot of thinking. About my priorities. About what I valued. About the kind of mother I was. And Jordan, I failed you. Not because you're successful and I didn't recognize it, but because I should have supported and valued you regardless of whether you were successful by conventional standards. That's true, I agreed. You should have. Your father and I, we got caught up in appearances. In what looked impressive to other people. Natalie's social media following seemed like success because it was visible and quantifiable and other people could see it. Your work seemed less impressive because we didn't understand it and couldn't show it off to our friends. That was shallow and wrong, and we're so sorry. I sat with that for a moment. It was, I had to admit, a more thoughtful apology than I'd expected. But it didn't erase 18 months of silence or the years of favoritism before that. What about Natalie? I asked. Does she understand what she did wrong? My mother looked uncomfortable. She's struggling, Jordan. Her life hasn't turned out the way she expected. I think she's doing some growing up finally, but it's been hard for her. Hard for her, I repeated. Mom, she demanded my room be converted into a closet. She literally made me homeless so she could have a bigger space for designer clothes, and you and Dad supported her. You let me believe that I was worth less than her handbag collection. That's not just a mistake or a misunderstanding. That's profound cruelty and dismissal. I know, my mother whispered. I know, and I don't have an excuse that makes it okay. We were terrible parents to you. We showed favoritism that was blatant and hurtful. We valued the wrong things, and we raised Natalie to have terrible values too. If you never forgive us, if you never want a relationship with us again, we deserve that. But I needed you to know that we know we were wrong, and we're truly sorry. I appreciated the honesty. But I also knew that apologies didn't obligate me to reconciliation. Thank you for saying that. Genuinely. But Mom, I can't just slot back into being your daughter like nothing happened. You hurt me. You dismissed me. You made me feel worthless in my own home. And I've spent 18 months building a life where I'm valued and respected, where I don't have to fight for basic recognition of my worth. I'm not willing to risk that hard-won peace by jumping back into family dynamics that have been toxic my entire life. We understand, she said, though I could see the hurt in her eyes. But maybe we could try, slowly. Maybe we could rebuild some kind of relationship, even if it's different from what we had before. Maybe, I said carefully. But it would have to be on very different terms. You'd have to actually show consistent change over time. Not just apologize when it's convenient, or when you realize I'm successful. And I'm not interested in helping Natalie network, or giving her career advice, or becoming her connection to my professional world. If we rebuild anything, it's because you all value me as a person, not because you see me as useful now. That's fair, my mother agreed quickly. More than fair. Jordan, we want you back in our lives, not because of your success, but because you're our daughter and we love you, and we've realized how much we lost when we drove you away. Over the next few weeks, as Grandma recovered and I flew back and forth from California to check on her, I had similar conversations with my father, and eventually with Natalie. Dad's apology was more stilted and uncomfortable, admitting failure didn't come naturally to him, but it seemed genuine. He acknowledged that he'd valued the wrong things and failed to support me when it mattered. Natalie's conversation was the hardest. She cried a lot, talked about how jealous she'd been of me, how insecure she'd felt despite appearing confident. She admitted that demanding my room had been cruel, and that she'd known it at the time, but had been too caught up in her own ego to care. I wanted what you have now, she said through tears. Not the money or the career specifically, but the confidence and the purpose and the feeling that you're actually building something real. I've spent years building a persona and it all fell apart so fast. And I watched you build an actual life with substance. And I'm so jealous, and so sorry, and so ashamed of how I treated you. It was the most honest Natalie had ever been with me, but honesty didn't automatically repair years of damage. I appreciate you saying that, I told her. But Natalie, you were cruel to me my entire life, not just about the room. You constantly compared yourself to me and found yourself superior. You dismissed my interests and my achievements. You made me feel like I was less than you in every way that mattered to this family. That doesn't just go away because you're sorry now. I know, she said quietly. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect us to be sisters again. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did wrong, and I'm trying to be better. If you've stuck with me this far, drop a comment telling me whether you think people deserve second chances after this kind of behavior, because what I decided next surprised even me. I didn't immediately reconnect with my family or allow them back into my life, but I did start taking their calls occasionally. I'd have brief video chats with my parents every few weeks, keeping them updated on surface-level things about my life. I responded to Natalie's occasional messages, though our conversations remained superficial and distant. What I realized over the following year was that I didn't actually want revenge or for them to suffer. I wasn't interested in punishing them forever for their mistakes, but I also didn't owe them the kind of close family relationship they seemed to want, where everything went back to normal and we pretended the hurt hadn't happened. So we built something new. Something with boundaries and honesty and realistic expectations. My parents learned to support me without trying to direct my life or take credit for my success. Natalie learned to have a relationship with me that wasn't based on comparison or competition. My grandmother, once she recovered from her stroke, became the glue that held these fragile new connections together. 2 years after leaving home, I was promoted again, this time to senior AI architect with a salary of $320,000 and significant equity in the company. I was 26 years old and had already been featured in tech publications as an emerging voice in artificial intelligence. I bought a beautiful house in Palo Alto with a view of the hills. I traveled internationally for both work and pleasure, and I built a life that exceeded anything I'd imagined possible. When I was packing up my bedroom while my family planned to convert it into a closet, I invited my parents to visit California once, carefully controlled and time-limited. They saw my house, met some of my colleagues at a casual barbecue, got a glimpse of the life I'd built. I could see the pride and regret warring in their faces. Pride that I'd accomplished so much. Regret that they'd missed so much of the journey and hadn't supported me when it mattered. "Your home is beautiful," my mother said softly, standing in my living room with its view of the hills. "You've built something really special here." "I have," I agreed. "And I did it without you. That's not meant to be cruel, it's just true. Everything you see here, everything I've accomplished, I did it because I believed in myself, even when you didn't. I did it because I was willing to walk away from people who didn't value me and toward people who did. We're so sorry we weren't the people who valued you from the beginning," my father said. "We should have been. You deserved better parents." "Yes, I did," I said honestly. "But I'm okay. I'm more than okay. And maybe someday we'll have a relationship that feels less like damage control and more like genuine connection. But it's going to take time, a lot of time." Natalie never visited California. We maintained a cordial but distant relationship through occasional messages and the rare phone call. She got a job in retail management, nothing glamorous but stable, and started slowly rebuilding her life on more realistic foundations. She'd learned, I think, that the approval of strangers on the internet couldn't substitute for genuine self-worth or authentic relationships. 5 years after leaving home, I'm now 29 years old. I'm a lead AI architect at Chen Technologies. I make over $400,000 annually, and I've contributed to projects that are literally shaping the future of how humans interact with artificial intelligence. I own a beautiful home, I have genuine friendships built on mutual respect and shared interests, and I have a relationship with a wonderful partner who values my mind and my character as much as anything else about me. My relationship with my family is cordial, but distant. We text occasionally, talk on holidays, and maintain a connection that's functional but not deep. I've forgiven them in the sense that I don't carry anger or bitterness about what happened, but I also haven't forgotten. The relationship we have now is the relationship their choices earned, and I'm at peace with that. The bedroom turned closet. They converted it back into a bedroom eventually, and rented it out to help with their finances. Apparently, the irony of that wasn't lost on anyone. I think about that moment sometimes, standing in my family's driveway, getting into that black car, driving away from people who'd never valued me toward a life that exceeded anything they'd imagined for me. It was the scariest and most liberating moment of my life. It was the moment I chose myself, chose my worth, chose to believe that I deserved better than people who would trade my housing for their convenience, and it was absolutely the right choice. The black car didn't just take me to the airport that day. It took me to the beginning of the rest of my life. A life built on my terms, valued on my merits, celebrated for my actual accomplishments rather than compared unfavorably to someone else's highlight reel. Sometimes walking away isn't giving up. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally prove they actually love you very conditionally indeed, and you have to decide whether you'll accept that or demand better. I demanded better. And I got it. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you for listening. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to walk away from toxic family dynamics, and whether you think second chances are worth giving, or if some bridges are better left burned. Your perspective matters, and I genuinely want to hear your thoughts. And remember, your worth isn't determined by people who can't see it. Build a life so good that their approval becomes irrelevant. That's the real victory. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, because everyone's got a story about the moment they chose themselves over people who didn't choose them. You're not alone in this journey.